This is the coolest show brought to you by Hip Hop Caucuses. Think 100%.
It's the coolest show you know, keep the culture connected. It's the coolest show you know, in your ear, yeah, respected. Expert level information, entertainment, education. Rev Yearwood got you covered as you hit your destination. Climate rules everything around me. Cream. For those who lost focus, close your eyes and just dream. Open your third eye, now the world is your off. Coolest show you know, it's the Hip Hop Caucus.
Always excited for these types of conversations, particularly this one. I have with me the founders of Sustainable Brooklyn in the house. I feel like you got to say in the house when you say that.
Hey.
In the house.
Well, first and foremost, how are you?
I'm
Doing well.
Yeah.
Well,
Same.
before we even get to that, let's get to who we have so we can kind of get that. We have Dominique, who's with us here, Dominique Drakeford. And I want to make sure, y'all, when I first was going to say this, I love the name of another organization that she's the founder of. She is the founder of Melanin Ass, a website, Instagram, that highlights people and brands. And also Whitney, who's a lawyer and a mother. But most importantly, they are the co-founders of Sustainable Brooklyn in the house.
Woo.
And I'm
Yeah.
actually I'm not actually in the studio, y'all. I'm actually on the road doing this conversation. Shout out to our producers, Cross and Destiny and Tamara, for making sure we have the right connection. I was here actually enjoying a show last night with Chris Rock. And so I got a chance to see that. I see you laughing over there. You got any take on the Chris Rock situation? Let's just start with that. I know we're gonna get to climate, and we're gonna get to all the issues of the day. We're gonna get all this deep stuff in. I know you're gonna.
I mean, that's deep in and of itself, right?
All right. We'll start there. What's your initial thoughts on that? And get ready, Dominic. I'm coming to you next. You can't get off on this one either. So, Whitney, what are your thoughts? I'm here. I just saw Chris Rock. We all know what happened. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, my thoughts, first of all, is that we all need to divest from celebrity culture. Second thing is that, protect Black women, okay? I think that, this conversation and the discourse about what violence is really telling. When we exercise boundaries out of love and compassion, sometimes that can look like, watch your mouth. And I think that was a watch your mouth situation. I've never given credit to the white gaze in terms of how respectability politics shows up in my life. So I can't really speak to that, discourse. That's not really my ministry. But I do think that there is something to say about a public display of the defense of a Black woman who was initially harmed. I personally can't speak to a pop culture example of that in the recent times that I've, ever seen that happen. So, it is unfortunate that it had to come to that, but, I think that the slap heard around the world was a commentary on, the evolution of comedy in general. It's not necessarily, we're not going for low-hanging fruit anymore because, we're living in a dystopian society right now, whereas it's not really unusual for Black people, but when we do display these types of actions on a public stage, it invites other people to the table to have these conversations, when I really think it should just be a conversation between us, But I see that as a love tap. I see that as an exercise of boundaries. I told you once, I'm not going to tell you twice. Watch your mouth.
Dominique?
Yeah, I agree with Whit 100%. Like, I come from the land of watch your mouth because I'm from Oakland. Let's be very clear. But I think, in addition to what Whit said, there has to be real conversations about redefinition. I think we need to redefine and be very transparent in redefining what comedy looks like today, and be able to nurture that environment, because now we're in a very, very different climate than when comedians were at their peak and we were watching Eddie Murphy and Delirium. Like, we have to have a real conversation about what comedy looks like and what it doesn't look like, especially for the culture. And I think we also need to have conversations about how we're invested in celebrity culture, or lack thereof, because we do need to divest from celebrity culture. I also think there's conversations about mental health in there, especially with regards to Black women and Black men. Will Smith's actions weren't solely about the comment, the G.I. Joe comment,
Right,
at all.
right.
There's so much that needed to be unearthed from his personal life, from their relationship. There's a lot of built up tension and trauma, and that has to be discussed, and there's nuances with that. So I'm here for the watch your mouth, but I'm also here for the Black community having enriching conversations about the roots of what happened and why.
Yeah, and hopefully it can be a healing moment for us all.
Yeah, and fuck respectability politics. I don't care that it was on that stage. Like, that is the last thing that I was worried about or thinking
Right.
about. And I know that was in the public sphere, but I'm not here for that.
I'm gonna get to sustainable Brooklyn in a second, and what that is. But while we here, actually, I want to piggyback something that you just said, Dominique. I think it's very important, and also Whitney, you kind of referenced this, is that this wasn't in a vacuum. This was a layered situation, and one of the things there that people are really looking to in this situation is around the fact that Jada was boycotting the Oscars, and she was a part of a movement with. She was leading the Oscars So White, and then when Chris was hosting, then in his capacity, he made a reference to Jada that says, how you gonna boycott something you wasn't invited to?
Invited to, yeah.
And I bring that up because a lot of times what we found out for those of us who are in these positions, particularly people of color and Black people, is that sometimes white people use people of color to attack other Black people. That they do that. And so as you are doing your work, have you ever come across a situation when you know that you've been attacked by Black people, but behind the curtain, the Wizard of
It's the
Oz?
institution of whiteness. Yes, we just had that situation.
All the time.
But yes, it happens quite often.
And it's really interesting because Dominique and I, neither one of us have like employers. We haven't had like 9 to 5 for almost a decade, and so to be in this position where we have some relative autonomy in how we, express our careers, our views, etc., and to engage with people who are, under that, strong system of I gotta get paid, so I'm not gonna really ruffle any feathers. In fact, I know that white supremacy is spoken from the mouths of Black people a lot, and so we are on the receiving end of that dynamic quite often,
especially in the sustainability space, because it has been so deeply narrated by whiteness, despite the fact that it's rooted in Blackness. There's a lot of layers to that, but yeah, we absolutely have.
Well, that's a good part of the transition. Let me just give a little shout out there for folks who don't know. The Hip Hop Caucus is a lot around using comedy to help with the climate crisis. Actually, they just did a documentary called Ancient Mama's Heat Wave. So that's my little plug. I get this moment to plug that.
Ancient Mama's Heat Wave.
Yeah. So if folks want to how they use comedians to really bring forth the issues in Norfolk around housing and many other things. But that's a side note for those who are listening. Just check that out. But for folks who might not know, please tell the audience what is Sustainable Brooklyn, what it is, and what do we need to know about it now?
Yes. Well, our tagline, Sustainable Brooklyn, is a community initiative. And we work to bridge the gaps between the mainstream sustainability movement, which tends to be very whitewashed, very myopic. And we bridge those gaps between the mainstream movement and targeted communities that are first and most impacted by the colonial climate crisis, which is a term that Dominique coined. And we do this by redefining what sustainability is through the lens of the African diaspora. And we do this through re-education or education, non-traditional education activations, volunteer days, symposia, workshops, keynotes, and we're developing a summer school for, emerging activists this summer with a youth group called Start Empowerment. So we're always just like pushing, the boundaries of what traditional sustainability looks like, feels like, how it's communicated, how it's understood and digested, because we know that this is a movement that is an all hands on deck situation, but the way that it's been framed within really the last 30 or so years has contributed to the erasure and the omission of our cultures, our contributions, and the fact that we are the originators of sustainability based on this, based on survival, on the need to survive in a white supremacist, capitalist, imperialistic state. And so, that's just our tagline. That's a little bit about what we do. And we can get into the story of how we met and all that stuff later, but that's Sustainable Brooklyn.
Yeah, Dominique, anything you want to add to that? Or how about this? Can you tell the audience about the unique ways that you build relationships and organize within for Black and Indigenous and people of color?
Yeah, I mean, in alignment with what Whit said, we literally understand community as a currency, right? And in understanding that that currency is enriched with so much wealth and knowledge, anecdotal information about sustainability from an innovation point of view, a technological point of view, from a creative point of view, we tap into our community to build bridges in order to share resources, in order to share information, in order to develop curriculums, in order to redefine narratives, in order to truly share and build and elevate and create ecosystems that are, rooted in care and rooted in how we see sustainability. We do this a number of different ways, whether it is literally meeting in our community, whether it is down the street at the local garden, whether we're producing elemental symposiums, whether we're getting folks together in a town hall to really understand and listen to what our community is saying, whether we're going into corporate spaces and informing folks how we created the table. We're not having a seat at the table. There's an amazing clip of how we talk about how we created the table for sustainability. But ultimately, I think from a pulled back macro lens, what we're doing is telling our community to reclaim sustainability and helping folks by guiding them with the resources and knowledge that we have available, while also pulling in aspects of ancestry, pulling in experts from all these different professional and creative and grassroots organizations, pulling all of these different perspectives in to really create this roadmap to what sustainability has to look like, specifically for the Black community and Nexus people of color.
Actually, before we move forward, we have a lot of folks who listen to the coolest show because it's the coolest show, and they come from our community. So Dominique, what is sustainability?
Traditionally, I went through the portals of traditional education with a BA in environmental management and a master's in sustainable entrepreneurship and fashion. So in the confines of institutionalized education systems, sustainability is about, meeting the needs of today without compromising future generations. Like that was sort of the overarching definition. And going through traditional education systems is when I learned that a lot of that, the definition is bullshit. Or BS, excuse me. I don't even know if I could cuss on here, but
you can cuss here.
Okay, cool.
Well, you can be yourself. Just be you. Just do you. How you do it? Yeah.
I know that's right. But a few years ago, I redefined a new base definition for sustainability that is defining it as an inherently Black and brown indigenous regenerative mechanism for living and engaging with nature that is grounded in ancestral relationship with the earth and has evolved into resisting colonial structure so that we can find well-being, joy, and ultimately healing. But I think with that said, we have to understand that, people ask us all the time about sustainability, as a career, or, how do you separate your career life with your professional life and all of that? And I think in defining sustainability, we have to understand that the embodiment of sustainability touches on every industry. It touches on every aspect of who we are. It touches on any type of way we need to heal or have joy. It touches on everything. It's not this very linear ideology. Sustainability is about how we sustain and regenerate ourselves in the most holistic way possible. So, it's not just about the environment, right? The environment is a small token, and we are like Black people. We are nature. Let's be clear. Let's be very clear. But it's about the food we're eating. It's about our hair. It's about our skin. It's about how we show up in places. It's about our food, our fashion. It's about our culture. It's about policy, politics. It's about economics. It literally touches on everything. And we have to take up space knowing that sustainability is it's everything. It's all the things.
And it really is like an antidote to structural systemic violence that we have, endured for generations. It is absolutely, building ecosystems of care. It's a philosophy that is rooted in radical care. I don't even think it's radical to care, but it is rooted in care practices that I didn't know about sustainability when my grandma was, preserving the plastic bags and the foil and, reusing the bags for hot oil treatments and, putting everything in the country crop containers and, storing her sewing materials in the butter cookie tins. Like, I didn't know that that's what would later become what white people are trying to tell us sustainability is. And so I just knew that as, these are just practices of care, that my grandmother, she learned from her mother and, her parents and, so on and so down the line, because these are the practices that have sustained us as community, as individuals. And these are the practices that will continue to sustain us. We just need more agency and more resources to make this more of a scalable impact for our communities.
And let's be clear, the practices that sustain us create the rubric for how it sustains the planet.
Right.
And I think we have to be very transparent about that. Our care practices, they take care of us, but they are the blueprint for how how that needs to be implemented systemically in order to heal the planetary fuckery that's happening right now.
Yes.
We are the root.
So this sounds very much in alignment with environmental liberation. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, absolutely. Sustainability requires environmental liberation, but it requires also a system of a series of abolitions, to create conditions for liberation, not just in the environment, but in all aspects of our existence.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we say liberation and justice, as that is the heartbeat of sustainability today, we have to remember that the Blackness component of it is also about joy, right? It's about
Yes.
celebration. It's about pillars of community abundance. Like that is also part of how we sustain ourselves, which is often not talked about in sustainability discourse. But that is a huge part of resistance for us and
Yeah.
sustainability.
So for those listening, you tell we hop right into it. We not going to stop. The car is moving. We're going to keep it moving 100 miles an hour here. I do want to make sure that you kind of hear the backgrounds of both Whitney and Dominique, and because it's very important around fashion in one aspect, because I am very clear of the colonizing aspects of fashion and how fashion can use to take away one's identity. Literally, how it is utilized almost where you're stripping away of your faith, your spirit, your history. All of that is taken away by wearing somebody else's clothes. One of the great things is that as human beings, we should probably be naked and not ashamed, but because we wear garments and clothing in that aspect, then those garments and clothing have been used throughout history to show where we're from, where we're going, our pride, the generals, the matriarchs, the patriarchs in our community. But that's taken away very much so, as you both know. So I want to get to that as a link. And I know that because I remember my days when I was one of my first early days of working in hip hop politics. My office where they stuck me in was in the Fat Farm office. I was in a little room, I think a closet, to be honest. They were coming to get the brooms and stuff, and
Wow.
I was in that room when we first started out. And that was the beginning parts to lead to Hip Hop Caucus many years later. But so I want to start with this with you, Whitney, because Whitney, among your accomplishments, you specialize in fashion law during your legal studies. So can you kind of introduce yourself and tell the audience how you came to understand the labor fair trade and the whitewashing of sustainability?
Sure. Yes. Thank you, Reverend. So let me start with where I'm from and where my people are from.
Okay.
So I am from the west side of Dayton, Ohio. Both sides of my family are from there. I lived there for the first 13 years of my life. I'm a descendant of my great grandfathers on both sides were sharecroppers. They moved to Ohio from Tennessee and Georgia, respectively, to work in the automotive industry. So GM was a huge, driver of commerce back then. And within the 13 years I was there, from like 86 to, the late 90s, I saw the complete deinvestment and, just denigration of my community, from the closing of recreational facilities. We would go skating, we would go to the bowling rinks, all of that was closed, to the grocery stores being closed and gas stations, and then finally the hospital that was in town. So I saw all of these impacts of structural inequity happening. I didn't have the vocabulary to understand what was happening in my community. But when my mom decided to leave Ohio, she's an artist, so this is also why a lot of my work is devoted to artists. I decided on my own to apply to a boarding school. This was not normal in my community. I got a full tuition scholarship, ended up going to Newport, Rhode Island to, have a better education. And this was the first time that I saw how white people lived. I never really had to interact with them when I was in the west side of Dayton, Ohio. And so when I get to boarding school, I'm becoming more aware of these conversations around fair trade, these conversations about, ocean, preservation and ecological preservation. But I never felt like I was welcomed in those spaces. I never felt like I had a place to even contribute to that discourse, even though I was interested in it. Of course, like, I mean, my mom raised me in the Buddhist faith. I've always been aware of the oneness of, you know, environment and self, and how we're all connected. But when I got to GW, when I got to college, you know, I'm leading the NAACP, I'm doing all this activism, and really just trying to find my way in all of this. Again, fair trade started popping up. You know, they had a really strong group on campus, but I didn't feel like I connected with the people, because they were mostly white people, and they weren't very welcoming. So I graduated into a recession. A large part of my sustainability journey is based on my own sustainability, and so my ability to sustain myself was the impetus for a lot of the decisions that I made. So I decided to work as a paralegal. Not decided, that was the only job that was really available for me at that time, in 2008. And so I'm aware now of how the legal system works a little bit. But I was drastically underpaid. So I was like, let me just go to law school, and so I can make as much as these associates, because I'm like running circles around them in terms of my intelligence and everything. So I was like, let me just do that. But I wanted to actually go to design school. And so it really came down to a coin toss. My mother was like, you'll have more stamina for law school now than you will later in life. You can do design anytime. I got to law school and hated it. I was like, why did I do this? Like, this is, you know, while I was really interested in understanding our legal code because of my background in activism and just based on how I am, the environment was pretty violent. And so I confided in a property professor my first year, and she said, have you heard of fashion law? And I was like, girl, what? Like, you just about to change my life. I had no idea about this area of law. This was like starting to really become part of the legal conversation at the time, fashion law. This is around 2010. So she delays my final. I go to fashion law symposium at Fordham, which was the first time they'd ever done it. I'm like, all right, this is where I'm supposed to be. I'm introduced to labor issues then in the fashion industry, but really from the perspective of, you know, garment workers overseas, which is fine, right? But we're not really connecting the dots between what's happening globally and what's happening domestically, and how we are affecting this global inequity that's happening. And also we're choosing to not address the inequity that the fashion industry is also contributing to here in the US, especially in Dayton. And so I started doing like Fashion Law Week with students at Howard University School of Law. So it was me and a bunch of other Black girls, and we just, you know, ran that symposium for many years with really no funding. And this was the first time that I started bringing these issues from the ivory tower of academia to the people who needed it. Like, majority of fashion designers that I know of, Black women. You know, like the majority of garment workers I know, Black or brown people. Like they, you know, these are the people who really need to know what the legal issues are, so that we can get, you know, have more agency in this conversation or in these actions that need to be taken for solutions to really impact all of us. And so from Fashion Law Week, I, you know, did everything from lobbying for fashion designers to get more creative, copyright-like protection, because as we know, fashion designs have a hard time having copyright protection. We'll get into that, but that's a main driver of appropriation. And so I'm lobbying for that. I'm also, you know, working in-house, doing all these things. I get a federal clerkship with a judge out in Vegas, and I started teaching my own sustainable fashion workshops, but still from the lens of kind of what Dominique was touching on, like this traditional idea of what sustainability is, which is really like doom and gloom, place blame on Western culture. Let's not even talk about race. and, you know, we just need to stop over consuming, right? And so I realized as I'm teaching these workshops, like there's a lot missing here, especially from my background in Africana studies. I had lived in Ghana when I was in college. Like I'd seen firsthand how, you know, we export textiles to landfills in Ghana, in this predominantly Black country. And so when I moved back to Brooklyn, I'm pregnant, thinking about what I want my legacy to be. I meet Dominique, and immediately we are like finishing each other's sentences. Like it was like, we here with it. And for a long time, I felt like I was on an island because no one was really connecting the dots and getting to the root of unsustainability, which to me is anti-Blackness and misogynoir. So if we are talking about the root of anti-Blackness, the root of unsustainability, we really have to address these nuances and address this idea of sustainability from our cultural perspective. And so Dominique and I just, you know, linked up. We had our first meeting and we started creating the framework for Sustainable Brooklyn. We had a town hall where it was like packed. And that was really the first time that we created the framework for Sustainable Brooklyn, where we decided to focus on fashion, well-being, and agriculture.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's how, you know, we got started. And, you know, from there, you know, it's taken off. So.
Oh man, I mean that's an amazing story, and I had to get some more into that because you said some things there that
there's so many things in there.
so many things that you know,
Gems.
so many gems. but so before we get to them gems, I just want to make sure, Dominique, I want to make sure you introduce yourself as well in your own words, and just kind of tell us particularly about regenerative agriculture and how it fits into the vision of Sustainable Brooklyn and sustainability, you know, in the culture.
Yeah. Okay. So about me and then regenerative agriculture, I'll try to draw nice parallels. I will try. So I'm Dominique. I hail from Oakland, and I think that's always a great place
the Bay,
to start.
Coming from the Bay.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. I grew up dark-skinned, skinny, ashy girl, loving nature, loving the outdoors, vibrant, Leo. I was ashy. My kneecaps were ashy. But, of course, you know, I would make sure to shea butter. But, you know, the skin, you know, I don't know. Ashy, dark-skinned, and skinny was my motto.
See, for folks who listen, they don't hear. Right there was a cultural significant moment. You know what I mean? Because Whitney showed her Ohio, she's like, listen, in Ohio, we walk with lotion. You know what I mean? We got it in our back pocket. But in the Bay, they're like, yo, we got to go get it. It's like, this is underground. This is like, we gonna get it.
Let me be clear. Like, my people in Oakland were hydrated. I was probably a little on the ashy side because I was always in nature. Like, I was climbing trees. I was that girl. Like, I was always roughaging through the wilderness in my FUBU. Let's be very clear. But I think, like, just growing up in Oakland sets the tone and the temperature for who I am, right? We all know, or hopefully we should know, that the Black Panthers were founded in Oakland in '66. And I think as I was immersed in white environmental spaces and white understandings of the environment, I'm gonna pay homage to the Black Panthers because I saw the political and cultural aspects of sustainability through how they fashion themselves, right? I saw that their clothes and the message they sent was very political, and it became a cultural relic of, you know, community programming and survival, circular survival systems and, you know, pillars of liberation and revolution. And so in understanding that in the history books, I'm learning about sustainability being, you know, that you see a Venn diagram where it's environmental, social, and economic. And I'm like, hold up. I feel like Black sustainability is more political and cultural. And so that's when I began to really, really create a new foundational framework for myself for how I govern myself and exist in a space while talking about sustainability and environmentalism, which is traditionally very harmful because of who has been having control of the narrative and the systems, right? So my background has been in, has been fostering youth development in Oakland and the Bay Area. I did a lot of nature appreciation curriculums. I took Black and brown kids throughout the Bay Area backpacking and on those excursions to reprogram their understanding and relationship with the earth and the environment. From a very political and cultural point of view, I did grant reviewing for Black and brown sustainability and environmental justice centered not-for-profits. I did a lot of different sort of non-traditional things with regards to sustainability growing up and not necessarily putting all the pieces together until I moved to New York, right? I think I moved to New York, eclectic as hell, right? A lot of thrift shopping, a lot of, sustainability motifs that are, again, cultural and political, right? I came very vibrant and colorful to a movement and a space that was very neutral and lackluster with regards to representation. And the only times I saw myself represented in the sustainable fashion space, moving from Oakland, is when folks are talking about labor, right? And so I began to sort of re-engineer how I talk about sustainability, because I'm gonna be clear. I mean, I used to talk about it in the very traditional, with a very traditional tongue, because I thought that's how you were supposed to, despite the fact that everything, my whole existence showed otherwise. It showed the political, it showed the cultural, it showed that I've been working with Black and brown youth and they've been sustainable as hell out of necessity and out of creativity. And so I had to recondition myself once I moved to New York and saw that the movement was all white, attending all white sustainability events and having all white speakers and all white audience members. And again, from time to time, you'll see a slideshow presentation with a Black person or a brown person making the clothes. And so that's when I that's when I spearheaded Melanin Ass, and the Ass stands for Unsustainable Style, because I needed to show the colonial and systemic fuckery of what was happening in the sustainability space, while also showing the joy and love that we have historically for sustainability. And so I created Melanin Ass to articulate the ways in which we've been sustainable, again, as an ode to Black sustainability as a form of reclamation, while also doing, a lot of creative direction and PR consulting and styling on the side. But it was important for me to position myself as a bridge for folks who didn't even use the word sustainable, but were clearly sustainable. A lot of Black folks and a lot of people of color around the globe, not just here in the States, don't even use the language of sustainability, despite the fact that they have inherently embodied that philosophy and ideology. And so from that, I started to I'm redefining sustainability, but also I had to redefine this idea of circularity, because it's been very much ingrained from a production point of view, right? You hear experts in sustainability talk about circular development in terms of, making sure clothes or garments are created while designing out waste, right? That's, having a circular system to mitigate waste so that we, don't have landfills, and so that, fabrics and fibers are made with more intentionality, with eco-friendliness at the center. But again, if I'm tapping into the Black Panthers, if I'm tapping into the cultural and political understanding of sustainability, it's also very much about Blackness and how we are able to sustain ourselves and our community. So circularity, if I'm starting to think about regenerative agriculture, right? I'm like, okay, circularity has been defined again by this white medium that's completely archaic. When I learn about George Washington Carver, who is the father of sustainable agriculture, right? And when I learn about Fannie Lou Hamer, and when I learn about how my people were sustainable before colonization.
At scale. Sustainable
At scale. And I think that has to be, a lot of shit, it don't start at slavery. It started before slavery. So when I start to pull all of these pieces together with a Sankofa mindset, past, present, and future, I'm like, all right, circularity is about to look a hell of a lot different. If I'm looking at regenerative agriculture to regenerate and to mitigate waste, mainstream systems aren't doing that because they still consider Black people waste. So how are we creating systems that are non-disposable when we're still disposable? That don't make no goddamn sense when our intellectual property and our bodies are still disposable, and that disposability is the framework for all other communities and cultures to be disposable.
Mind you, we are the agriculture class, right? Like, if it wasn't for us, there would be no cotton, indigo. It would be no fashion industry, point blank, period.
Without our bodies. Our intellect was built into the economic framework of unsustainability because we were experts in sustainability, right? So we have to utilize this knowledge from our ancestors who have created the rubric, right? And then have recreated circular systems of care and access to knowledge and creative collaboration and support out of necessity. And so this is exactly what Sustainable Brooklyn has been doing, creating ecosystems where we pay homage to our ancestors and our contemporaries who are doing it today so that we can continue a future where sustainability is the nucleus and the heartbeat of who we are and what we're doing from a cultural and political standpoint.
So let me hop in there. I if you're listening now, I told you in the car. I told you going fast. Dominique and Whitney done took off the brakes. We ain't got no more brakes. We just they got poor Rev in the car here. We speeding. We rolling now, yo. We getting it. I want to say this too about this debate because and all over. I mean, folks in Ohio too, but this is for the Bay. Many of you know that as a liberation fighter, as an activist, I am always so amazed at how much my sisters and brothers, when I go to the Bay, try to pour back into me. They know I've been either beaten up by the police, or I'm out there fighting, or been arrested. Now, more than 30 sometimes, for whatever movement we fighting. And they know when I go there to the Bay, I just want to say this to Dominique and to Whitney. The Bay is one place that they pour into me. I'm always amazed at how much because of their tradition, I think, from the Panther. When I was there fighting for the Oscar grant and that we were dealing with that back in the day. I never forget people like Davy D. There's so many people who were there who would come and just give me food and this, let me just kind of relax over there. And so I just always appreciate going to the Bay. And I love how they fight. They won't call Chevron. They'd be like, that's Chevron, and the Bay will get it. So I just wanted to say that. And
Wait, can I add something? You just made me think.
No,
I think it's important, like, you mentioned police brutality and Oscar grant, and something that Whit and I are also passionate about articulating with regards to sustainability. Whit mentioned anti-Blackness is the root of unsustainability. And it's important for us to understand and articulate and deep dive into the fact that the prison industrial complex, of course, stemming from cotton plantations, is so much of why we have unsustainable systems and the environmental climate crisis that we're in. And this is what we're talking about. Folks aren't really ready to have those very transparent conversations about sustainability from this vantage point. We have to talk about systems theory, which is very much wrapped around the industrial prison complex, and the blueprint for that, which has scaled the globe as the manufacturing industry has exploded. And so that was just one example. Like all of that, it has to be immersed into our rubric for sustainability and community care and localized and also global development.
I have to ask this question on that note. So, with Sustainable Brooklyn, what are your thoughts as you talked about how you both had this epiphany. You both began to, yourself evolve from academic to other types of what people would call sustainability to what it really is, and connect the dots for our people and break down silos. You mentioned obviously from the prison industrial complex and other types of systems that oppress our people. What about the nonprofit industrial complex? What about the liberal industrial complex or the progressive white industrial complex? How has that impacted your work? Okay, y'all fanning yourselves. Lord have mercy. I told you the brakes are gone, the doors are now gone. We are. Dominique took a drink of water. Let's get it. I don't know who want to start it. Lord, listen, we just lost Whitney out the frame. The picture fell out the frame. My. So I don't know who want to lead with that one. Dominique got close to the camera. Dominique, you got closer, so but your face got very aligned. So go ahead, kick it off.
Well, let me just put this out here. A lot of my work in youth development started at a nonprofit. Shout out to the East Oakland Youth Development Center and Regina Jackson, who literally molded me into the woman I am today. So I'm always going to pay homage to the nonprofit, the very specific nonprofit that helped raise me and helped provide a platform where I can discuss unapologetically sustainability to Black youth who are continuously subjugated in the streets of Oakland. Mm-hmm. Now, for sustainable there probably is a huge difference between the way that nonprofits work in Cali versus New York, perhaps. But for sustainable Brooklyn, and this is something we've talked about as we've tried to figure out what type of legal structure sustainable Brooklyn should be presented as. And I know Whit can speak to this a little bit more beautifully and poetically, but I think there has to be a real conversation when we're talking about the nonprofit industrial complex. There has to be a real conversation about the corporate veil or the corporate grubby ass fingers that have to be embedded in your ecosystem in order for it to function, right? And I think especially if we talk about anti-Blackness and colonization, and we really are working with folks who are on the ground in communities, toes in the soil, really, really working to build sustainability in communities. That is it's on opposite sides of the spectrum when we're talking about corporations. And for corporations to have to provide us with funding or provide a not-for-profit with funding, that means that they have a say in how you show up, what you look like, what you can say, who you can serve, and how your narrative is packaged to the public, but also how the interworkings of your operations function. And we did not want that because authenticity is the heartbeat of what we're trying to do. And I'll set the tone and let Whit take over from there.
Whitney?
That was beautiful. I mean, the nonprofit industrial complex is nothing more than just money laundering of institutions for wealthy people. But I'm always thinking about what it means to create value, especially when we talk about sustainability. Like because we are Sustainable Brooklyn, we have to embody sustainability first and foremost. So, when I think about how to create value, it's usually from BS, right? Like we have created beautiful, joyful lives, Dominique and I, from, whatever BS we've endured individually, although it looks like I'm frozen. Am I frozen?
No, you're good.
Okay. All right. So, so with that said, the nonprofit industrial complex and neoliberalism, while they are inherently unsustainable because they are inherently anti-Black, there are ways that we can utilize the nonprofit industrial complex to create more value for us, right? I'm always thinking about this origin of scholarship. I didn't know that until recently that Thomas Jefferson created this concept of scholarship, and it really was meant to. And he's quoted as saying it's like picking a few exceptions from the rubbish, So it's like, all right, we're trash, right? It all goes back to regeneration and sustainability. Okay, so you're talking about trash, right? And you're saying that you're picking a few exceptions to, create really a middle class, a buffer between, labor classes, poor working class people, and the wealthy. Yes, inherently, this idea of scholarship is classist, anti-Black, everything. It is really negative. But I am a recipient of scholarship, and I have created a lot of value from that institution. So I think that's the same thing that we do with nonprofits and how we function, in these systems, even in capitalism. We have to focus on 100% creating value from systems and conditions that otherwise do not support us, right? And so I think that's the root of our praxis. It really is a praxis of sustainability, a merging of theories and actions to create the systems and the world that we really know we deserve and we know our children and their children deserve.
Yeah. I want to piggyback on that also.
Yeah, please.
I also, very much in alignment with what Whit said, as Black people who, our DNA is riddled with trauma, I always think that it's important for us to understand that there are different strategies to get to where you want to be in order to elevate the community and the culture. So as much as I'm not here for nonprofits and as much as I've seen examples of it working, I'm always, and we're always mindful of the fact that there's different strategies to get to a place where we can regenerate culturally and communicatively. So yeah,
Man.
It's not just one way to get things done in a capitalist society because we have to participate. It's about creating the best virtuous and value-oriented strategy that creates the most meaning for you. So yeah, important to note.
So these conversations like this go so fast. It is crazy.
Are we
I'm
at
looking
time
forward.
already?
Done?
Yeah, this is how crazy. This is how crazy this is. But I want to do this though. I want to make sure. So I obviously want you to tell people, obviously, how they can find Denver, Brooklyn, and all that stuff. That's that question. But this question is for both of you. In this time that we went, if there's something, the great thing about the cool show that we got a really large audience, and so I really want you to talk to them. If there's something you think, I know Whitney, you mentioned like copyright law. You may not want to say that. We can come back. We can add things so people can find it later. But I want you to speak to them, and I'm gonna add a caveat. I want you to speak specifically if you can speak to your younger self. If you now can kind of go back and there's a younger version of you, just like you, who's listening to this, I also want you to speak to her.
Whit actually does that in practice.
Yeah.
She writes to her younger self.
Yeah. So I want you to take this. I want to give you this floor. I want to give it to you, and give it to both. So Whitney, since you do that in practice, I'll let you start, and then Dominique, I want you to go next. And this is your time. Whatever you want to say, it's your opportunity.
Okay, Whitney, baby girl. First of all, never stop celebrating yourself. You got you this far, right? There will be times where hope will be something that you will grapple with, because you will encounter despair. You will go through it. And there's a lot to be weary of. But hope has nothing to do with optimism. This is something I've learned recently from Dr. Cornell West. Hope has nothing to do with optimism. It's about understanding the gravity of the situation that you are facing and having the courage to persevere and create value from this situation based on truth. And truth is something that is your most valuable asset. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Your truth, and the truth that is based on radical love, care, and courage and compassion, will get you farther in life than any dollar amount ever could. Never stop reaching back, Sankofa, Sankofa, Sankofa all day, and create the conditions for future generations, because this is a period of planting, and this is not the time to sow. This is the time to plant. Make sure those roots from whatever you are planting are strong, are plentiful, and are creating connections with the other things that you have planted beneath the soil, sometimes in the darkness, always actually in the darkness. That's that shadow work, so that you can sprout beautiful, bountiful futures for not just yourself, but for, to create a harvest for your children and their children, and so on and so forth. So that's what I would tell my younger self if I encountered her today.
Whoa. I know that's right. Sermon.
Dominique.
Okay. Dom, baby girl. We know you were born a Leo for a reason.
Listen.
Right? You have this fire. You have this fire and desire. Let me stop. You have this you have this succulent orbital energy that at this time you are using to understand yourself and understand your internal ecosystem. But remember, the power of your Leo energy, the power of why you exist today, and you choosing your parents, and you choosing to have agency and growing up in Oakland, all of that power is actually not for you. You're a vessel. You're a bridge. Mm-hmm. And the sooner you realize this, because you may find this out way later on down the road, but you can harness that power and be a vessel for collective community much sooner than you think. You're not too young to start to use that power, that strength, that lioness energy to change paradigms in the most unique and creative and funky and fly way. You have that abundance built inside of you. You have that resilience built inside of you. You may go through so many challenging moments where you have to question who you are, question why you're in this family, question what route you take in terms of your career path. You're going to question all of these things. But baby girl, you are a whole universe. You are nature. You literally are the soil for seeds to be planted. And you are going to touch so many lives. You're going to touch so many lives and create an entire apparatus just based on who you are organically and authentically in the most minuscule ways, because you are soil. You are soil, and ecosystems don't thrive. Natural atmospheric ecosystems don't thrive without soil. And you're going to find the air, you're going to find the sun, you're going to find the galaxy, you're going to find all of these things to help build out a atmospheric community that's going to evoke change for Black folks. Unlock that potential, baby girl. It's not too soon. Done.
Amazing. Where can people find and support Sustainable Brooklyn?
Instagram at SustainableBK is the place where we're at the most. SustainableBK.co is our website. It's in the middle of being updated. We also are part of a collective for the Greenish book. So you can find us at _Greenish_book on Instagram as well. And tap in, connect with us, email us, DM us. We're here to continue to be a bridge for culture and community.
Amazing. And those are our guests today. Our guests today are Whitney McGuire and Dominique Drakeford, founders of Sustainable Brooklyn. And I am Rev Yearwood, your host of The Coolest Show.
This is The Coolest Show, brought to you by Hip Hop Caucuses. Think 100%.
It's the coolest show, you know, keep the culture connected. It's the coolest show, you know, in your ear, yeah, respected. Expert level information, entertainment, education. Rev Yearwood got you covered as you hit your destination. Climate rules everything around me. Cream. For those who lost focus, close your eyes and just dream. Open your third eye, now the world is your off. Coolest show, you know, it's the Hip Hop Caucus.